All right, so now we're going to start looking at word problems where we're going to write an equation for our word problem, okay? Now, this is going to feel like a lot. Don't stress out. We're going to practice this a lot in class, okay? But we're going to go through and I'm going to give you some examples, okay? So the first thing that you have to do is you need to define your variables, okay? So that's basically you're going to say what letters are you using and what do they stand for, okay? We've done this before when we've said like X is the number of puppies, or M is the size of the milkshake or something like that. But in these problems, instead of just having one variable, you're going to have two. Okay. So once you've done that, the next thing you have to decide is what information have you been given? There's three separate ways that you approach these problems. Sometimes you're going to be given a slope and a starting amount, and you're going to follow these steps. If you're given a point and a slope, you follow these steps. And if you're given 2 points, you follow these steps. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through some of these word problems and we'll sort of explain what you do as we get there. So let's look at this first guy. So Toby rents a car. He drives it for 115 miles. He gets a bill for $66.50. The rental company charges 11 cents per mile. Okay, this is a pretty common situation if you rent like a U-Haul truck or like a truck from Home Depot or something. A lot of times they'll charge you like a starting fee to rent the U-Haul. Like you'll see advertised that it's like $19.95 to rent the truck. And then you pay a little bit for every mile that you drive. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is define our variables. So you need to figure out what are the two things in this problem that change. Okay, so how many miles you drive the car for, that could change in this situation, right? Toby can decide how many miles he's going to drive. Okay, and then as the number of miles changes, what he has to pay will also change. The fact that the rental company gives you this fee, that doesn't change. That's always going to be 11 cents per mile because they determine that in advance. Okay, so my two variables are going to be the miles and what his bill is. So I'm going to define my variables. M is going to be the number of miles. Okay, and then I'm going to use B, I guess, right, for the amount of the bill. Okay, so that's how much money it is. All right, so now what we're going to decide is what information did they give us? Okay, so we've got some different things that are given here. So it's either going to be a slope and a starting amount, a point and a slope, or 2 points. Okay, so for this one, remember slope is a rate of change. Okay, so do I have a rate of change here? Yeah, I do, because I know that they're charging me 11 cents per mile. That's what a rate of change is, right? As you drive each mile, this is how your price changes. Okay, so the first thing that I know is I'm given a slope. That's the 11 cents. Okay, so then I've got to figure out what else do I know? Okay, do I know a starting amount? So that would be a starting amount would be like you have to pay this much to rent the truck, which they didn't tell me. I don't know if I have to pay like $19.95 for the truck or not. Okay, a point would be when they give you a set of whatever your variables are. So for this problem, when they tell you for this many miles, this was the bill. Okay, and that's what we have here. For 150 miles, I know what the bill is. So that is going to be a point. They gave me information from both of my variables at the same time. Okay, so I've got a point. And my point is that at 150 miles, right, it cost me $66.50. Okay, so now I know that these are the directions I'm going to have to follow. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to use my point for X and Y, and I'm going to use M equals whatever my slope is. We're going to plug into Y equals MX plus B and solve for B, and then we'll write our equation. Okay, so we've done this before. This shouldn't be anything new. Okay, so I'm going to plug this stuff in to my Y equals MX plus B. Okay, so Y, that's the 66.50. Okay, equals M, that's our slope, that's the 11 cents, times X, that's the 150 from my point, plus B. Okay, so you can take a look at that, right? And I just plugged in these two numbers. That was my X, that was my Y, this was my M. Okay, and now I'm just going to go ahead and calculate this. Okay, so I'm pulling up my calculator. All right, so here's my calculator. It's my fancy phone calculator. All right, so I'm going to multiply the 11 cents times 150. So that's 16.50. Okay, and then I'm going to subtract that 16.50 from both sides to get the b by itself, right? So my little step that I'm doing here is I'm subtracting the 16.50 from both sides. Okay, and 66.50 minus 16.50, so 66.50 minus 16.50, $50. So b is $50. And then from there, you should be able to write your equation pretty easily. So my equation is going to be y equals my slope, that's the 11 cents, times x plus my starting amount. Okay? All right, and that's how you'd write that equation. Now, just as a side note, this equation, what does this mean? Well, this is telling me that I'm spending 11 cents per mile, and that 50 at the end, that's my starting amount, right? So what that tells me is that when he rents this truck, they charge him $50 to rent the truck, and then he has to pay 11 cents per mile. Okay? All right, so that's kind of our first example. Now we're going to do some more examples. This is from your homework. My printer was being a little bit funky, so it's sort of printed in blue, and it's like the sentences are a little bit cut off, but you should have a copy of this that you can pull up on Classroom so that you'll have this available to you. Okay, so let's take a look at this first one. So City Electric Company calculates a customer's monthly electric bill as $5 plus 7.8 cents for each kilowatt of energy used. That's just how you measure energy, okay? We're going to write a linear equation that relates the kilowatts used and the monthly bill. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is define our variables. And see this last sentence, right? Just like before, when you go to the last sentence, that's going to be a good place to figure out what your variables are, because it tells you to write a linear equation relating the kilowatts per hour used and the monthly bill. So those are going to be my two variables. I'm going to go ahead and use x and y. So I'm going to make x the number of kilowatt hours used. And again, that's just how you measure energy, just like how we measure like distances in like feet or inches. You measure energy in kilowatt hours. Okay, and I'm going to make y the amount of the monthly bill. Okay, so now I just have to figure out what information did they give me. Well, the bill is $5 plus 7.8 cents per kilowatt used. So no matter what, you have to pay $5, and then you have to pay an extra 7.8 cents every time you use a kilowatt hour. Okay, so what that tells me is this guy right here, I have to pay that no matter what. That is a starting amount. Okay, so I've got a starting amount, and the 7.8 cents, right? That is my slope. That's a rate of change. Every time the energy changes, my bill changes by that much. Okay, so this problem gave us a starting amount and a slope. Okay, so that's this guy. Okay, so when you have a starting amount and a slope, these ones are really nice because they're actually really easy. You're going to use M for your slope and B for your starting amount. And then you just plug it into y equals mx plus b. Okay, so these ones are super nice. So from here, I can just write the equation. It's just y equals my slope, 7.8, right, times x plus my starting amount, $5. Okay, and you could write 5.00 or just 5. It's the same thing, right? And that's it. That's my equation. So there's very little math for that one. Okay, so far, what have we learned? We've learned that this kind of problem is easier than that kind of problem. Okay, cool. All right, so let's take a look at one more example. So this guy down here. So Executive Auto Rental charges a fixed daily rate and a mileage charge. Okay, so that just means that this rental place, every day you have to pay a certain amount of money plus extra money for how many miles you drive. And that's pretty typical for renting a vehicle. Okay. One customer rents a car for 1 day and drives it for 125 miles. He's got a bill of $35.75. Another customer rents a car for a day, drives it for 265 miles, and has a bill of $51.15. We're going to write a linear equation relating the miles driven and the total cost. Okay, so we're starting with defining our variables. Okay, and again, looking at this one, it tells me in that last sentence, write the linear equation relating miles driven and total cost. Those are my two variables. So I'm going to use X is the number of miles driven. Okay, and then I'm going to use Y for the total cost. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Okay, so now we have to look at what information we're given here. So the first thing they tell us is that this one guy drives it for 125 miles and then has this much of a bill, right? So they gave me a number of miles and the bill that went along with it. Okay, so that is a point. Okay, so right here, they told me the number of miles and they told me the amount of the bill. That's a point. Okay, and then a little further in the problem, they told me that for this many miles, it cost this much money. So again, that's relating the two things that we said were our variables. So that is also a point. So this problem gave us 2 points, and that is the third type in our notes, okay? So if they're given the 2 points, first we're gonna find the slope between our points, right? And we're gonna do that using our little table, right? Where you find the change in Y over change in X, right? Okay, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a point for X and Y and use M for your slope, okay? And we're gonna plug it into Y equals mx plus b and solve, and then write your equation. So the only thing that's different between these two is that this one they give you the slope, this one they don't. So these ones, right, if you look at these blanks, these are exactly the same. This one just has one extra step at the beginning. Okay, so that's how we're gonna start this one. We're gonna start by figuring out our slope. Okay, so I'm gonna write these 2 points in a little table, right, where this is my number of miles and this is my total cost, right? So 125 miles was $35.75. And then 265 miles was $51.15. Okay, so now I'm going to find my slope. Remember, to find slope, I'm looking at from here to here and from here to here. Change in Y over change in X. So this, I'm going up. Okay, and I have to figure out how much I'm going up. And the easiest thing to do is to use subtraction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 35.75 minus 51.15. Oops. Typed the wrong number, 51.15. Okay. And then it says so this told me it's negative 15.4. I don't know if you can really see that on the screen, but it told me it's a negative answer. But because I can look at this and see that the numbers are going up, I'm not going to write negative. I'm just going to say that we're adding $15.40. Okay, so it doesn't matter which order you subtract them in, as long as you kind of use your brain. Okay, and you don't want to use your brain, always do the second one, subtracting the first one. But if you just kind of can look at them and decide if it's plus or minus, that's, I think, the easier way to do it. Okay, so on this side, again, I want to figure out the distance between those. So I'm going to subtract the two numbers. Oops, I typed that wrong. There we go. So it's 140, and I can see that these numbers are going up. So I'm adding 140. All right, cool. So then my slope is going to be change in Y over change in X. So I'm going to do 15.4. So 1540 divided by 140, which is 0.11. Okay, so we got a decimal, but that's okay, because remember, slope is your rate of change. So what this is telling me is it's telling me that they're charging me 11 cents a mile. Okay, so when you rent this car, they're going to charge you a fixed daily rate and then a mileage charge. Well, the 11 cents is the mileage charge. Every mile you drive it, you have to pay 11 cents. Okay, so now we've got our slope, all right, and we got to actually figure out our equation. So we're going to go back, and again, we've done this before. So we're going to go back and we're going to use one of our 2 points and our slope. Okay, and it does not matter which point you do. You can choose whichever one looks better to you. Okay, so I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use the top point. So I'm going to use 125 and then 35.75 as my point, right? Where this is going to be X and that's going to be Y. And then I'm using M is the 11 cents. So plug that into y equals mx plus b. So my y value is 35.75. My M value, 11 cents. X is 125. And then plus b, that's the thing that I don't know yet. All right, so to my handy dandy calculator, I'm going to multiply 11 cents times 125. We got 13.75. I know that's a decimal, but that's okay, right? Because we're talking money. 13.75 makes sense in terms of money. Okay, and then to finish solving this, I'm going to subtract that 13.75 from both sides, right? To get that b by itself. So I'm going to do 35.75 minus 13.75. 22. So I've got 22 equals b. All right, awesome. So we are almost done. I know this is a long problem. Okay, but that's it. Then we just have to write our equation. So it's just y equals my slope, 11 cents, times x plus the b we just found. Okay, and there's my equation. So what does this mean in terms of the problem? Well, what this tells me is that this mileage or this rental place charges you 11 cents per mile, plus they have a $22 charge every day. So you have to pay them $22 to rent the car, no matter how far you drive it. So like if you rent the car and then you drive it up the street to the gas station and then back, they're going to charge you still $22, even though you really didn't go anywhere. Okay. But then you also pay 11 cents per mile. Right? So that's what's going on here. $22 fee plus 11 cents. Okay? So those are your 3 ways that you're going to do these problems. This is the super easy way. This is kind of the medium way. And this one has all of the steps to it. Okay? So you start by figuring out what are your variables and then what information did they give you? Did they give you a slope or a rate of change? Okay? So remember, your slope is the same thing as a rate of change. Okay. So did they give you a rate of change? Did they give you a starting amount? So like a flat fee that you always have to pay or what something was originally? Okay. Did they give you a point where you're connecting the 2 things that we said our variables were? Okay. And once you figure out that information, then you should be able to do some of these word problems. Okay. So like I said, we're going to practice these in class together so that you'll have time to get some feedback as you work through them. So don't panic, right? But do the best you can with them.